Today's lesson is going to be about Thomas Jefferson, his party, known as the Jeffersonian Republicans, and his presidency. If you have not already done so, please read the short passage about Thomas Jefferson's vision for America and fill in the chart attached to this assignment. Thomas Jefferson is, in many ways, the founder of American liberalism, but he is also a man of vast and complex contradictions. The most glaring being that despite being a slave owner himself, Jefferson viciously attacked the institution as being unjust, immoral, and undemocratic. But there were other contradictions, as we will see. It is also important to consider if complexities and contradictions are simply characteristics that all human beings incur as their thoughts and ideas evolve through the years. Today, in considering Jefferson's presidency, it is important to factor in his own view. Jefferson was highly suspicious of executives such as presidents and kings. He feared the tyranny of a president with too much power. In fact, when Jefferson died, he wanted 3 accomplishments on his tombstone, none of them being his own presidency. He was proud of being the founder of the University of Virginia, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and the author of the Virginia Statutes on Religious Freedom. As president, he was put into positions where he ultimately expanded the role of the federal government, as well as altered the crux of the American economy, among other things, which greatly contradicted his core beliefs. We are going to investigate several of Jefferson's presidential decisions and evaluate which were contradictions, which were ultimately positive, and which may have been problematic. Jefferson is most well known for the purchase of the Louisiana Territory from France. The decision was a tremendous bargain for America, costing less than 5 cents per acre. Additionally, the increasingly aggressive Napoleon Bonaparte was prevented from establishing a territory in the United States from where he could potentially launch an invasion against the United States. On the surface, this seems to be the best of all possible decisions. But the purchase of Louisiana forced Jefferson to violate many of his own core belief systems. 1. The original goal was never to purchase such a vast territory, only the port of New Orleans. When the offer was made to sell all of this vast territory to the United States, Jefferson had to consider that there was nothing in the Constitution that specifically allowed an executive to purchase territory from other countries. To legally make the deal, Jefferson used the Elastic Clause, a power he had very much objected to when Federalists had used it to create a national bank. This move meant both parties had used the Elastic Clause, giving future presidents justification to use it in the future. The expansion of federal power, particularly executive power, was the last thing Jefferson wanted, but he felt that in this circumstance, for the security of the country, it was justified. However, Jefferson could have asked Congress and the states to pass an amendment to the Constitution giving the executive the right to purchase land. If he had done that, he could have stayed consistent with his beliefs and purchased Louisiana, but Jefferson believed it would take too long to pass an amendment, so he used the Elastic Clause anyway and solidified his hypocrisy. But before you begin shaking your head at Jefferson and the Republicans, consider that Federalists who strongly objected to Jefferson's use of the Elastic Clause were defying their belief in the expansion of federal power. Federalists were angry because the land that would eventually become states would likely be used for agriculture rather than manufacturing, which defied their economic agenda. So while Federalists should have applauded the use of the Elastic Clause, they instead chose to condemn it, solidifying their hypocrisy as well. As discussed in an earlier class, the war between France and Britain was intensifying, and the United States, probably wisely, chose to remain neutral. However, that did not stop France and Britain from trying to pull America onto their side exclusively. America was valuable primarily as a trading partner, so both countries began raiding America's ships when trading with the other country. The Jeffersonian Republicans, however, decided that joining the war on either side would be problematic, so instead chose to set up a trade embargo, which means trading with any country was now prohibited. While it kept America neutral in the war, it caused an economic disaster. Without being able to trade with other countries, farmers could not export crops and therefore lost profits. Also, without an at-home manufacturing base, the prices of what little manufactured goods were available skyrocketed. So, was the embargo a sound decision? Well, that's hard to say because the negative consequences were obvious any way you sliced it. But what is clear is that Jefferson's interference in the economy went against his supposed strict constructionist values. In other words, Jefferson is yet again using the elastic clause and expanding the power of the federal government. Additionally, Jefferson's vision for an agriculturally based economy was also falling by the wayside. The embargo caused the manufacturing base in Americas to steadily increase, and that increase continued well into the next 2 centuries. What you see here in this cartoon is the frustration many Americans felt about the embargo. The turtle, oh grab me, represents the embargo. We know this because oh grab me is embargo spelled backwards. Jefferson was also interested in reducing taxes, particularly the whiskey tax, which we know from the debate was particularly odious to the farmer-supporting Jeffersonian Republicans. But reducing taxes comes with a price, so to speak. In this case, it left America with a very low defense budget amidst many trade problems. Not only was there a war between France and Britain that the US was regularly being drawn into, but there was also potential bribes to be paid to pirates. You may be asking, why should pirates be getting anything from the US? They are criminals. Well, Jefferson asked the same question. Pirates, interested in being paid their bribe, imprisoned American soldiers until the ransom was paid. Could Jefferson have gone to war with the pirates over it? Yeah, maybe. But in the midst of trying to protect ships from being raided during a war and with a limited defense budget, not so much. Taxes are never fun, and the whiskey tax was clearly unfair. But without an adequate tax base, the federal government will struggle to protect its people properly. Marbury versus Madison is a simple problem that ended up being a monumentally important legal turning point in American history. It began because Marbury, a judge who leaned towards the Federalist Party, was appointed by the Adams administration literally at the last minute. Madison, the new Secretary of State, was a Jeffersonian Republican who did not want him to have the appointment. The issue was turned over to the Supreme Court under another Federalist and another M name, John Marshall. Marshall decided that although Marbury was entitled to his appointment, Madison was under no obligation to give it to him. Seems pretty irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but in the process, John Marshall declared an act of Congress unconstitutional. In doing so, he set up the precedent for judicial review. This means that from then on out, the Supreme Court would be the political body that decides on the constitutionality of laws, not the states. This is, of course, another one of Jefferson's decisions that unwittingly led to the establishment of more power to the federal government and less to the states. Again, disrupting the Jefferson vision for America. One of the more relevant aspects of Jefferson's presidency is that he was the first president to enter office after ousting the opposing party, in this case, the Federalists. The fact that this peaceful transfer of power occurred has been a model for most other presidencies ever since. Until recently, every transfer of power in American history has been peaceful. The exceptions, of course, being the January 6th riot at the Capitol in 2021, and some historians include the Lincoln presidency as an example of a non-peaceful transfer. But Lincoln's legitimate presidency was not being questioned, only whether the southern states had the right to secede. So overall, Jefferson and Adams set an important precedent. In fact, it is often referred to as the Revolution of 1800. Jeffersonians acted in kind by not overturning many of the policies put in place by the Federalists, even some of the ones to which Jeffersonians strongly objected. For example, most of Hamilton's plans were kept in place. The only tax that was removed was the whiskey tax. Tariffs remained despite not being helpful to Jefferson's agricultural vision. The Sedition Act and the National Bank, both of which Jeffersonians detested, were allowed to expire rather than immediately repealed. Some would say Jefferson was elected to dismantle previous policies. But Jeffersonians, like most parties that replaced other parties in history, made adjustments rather than a complete dismantling of previous policies. But this does not mean there was no drama between the parties. You are probably aware that Aaron Burr killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. In case you haven't heard, there's a Broadway play about it. But Burr's ambitions also involved multiple conspiracies against the United States, and because of the way the Electoral College worked at the time, Burr was also Jefferson's vice president. Jefferson ended up supporting a treason charge against Burr, as well as a change in the Constitution that would require presidents and vice presidents to run together on a ticket. While this certainly worked out well for his precarious vice presidential situation, it also solidified the persistence of political parties and perhaps permanently helped to divide America along liberal and conservative political lines.